Hello, my name is Andrew Spivey and I'm from Bethpage, Tennessee. This is my second year to attend Pennington Bend church camp, ministry camp, and I'm glad to be here. And I'll be focusing on sin. A little girl and her dad were riding in their car one day during a terrible rainstorm. The dad could tell that the little girl was deep in thought and wondered what she was thinking. So he asked her, and she looked up at him and she said, "Dad, I was just noticing how the rain is like sin and God is like the windshield wipers, just wiping it away." The dad was shocked to hear such a big thought from such a little girl, but he decided to ask her one little question just to see what she would answer. So he looked at her and he said, "Honey, what does this tell you when you see that the rain keeps falling on the windshield?" The little girl didn't hesitate to answer, to say that we keep on sinning, but God can just keep on forgiving us. We all sin, and we can see this in Romans chapter 3, verse 9. Chapter 3, verse 9, it says, "What then? Are we Jews any better off? No, not at all, for we have already charged that all. Both Jews and Greeks fall under sin." We have all sinned, as we see in this verse, and we all know that we have sometime in our lives. And we probably even know people who have sinned. But what do we do to overcome this sin? Today, I want to focus on what types of sin there are so we can know what we're up against and how to overcome these sins. Before I get into what types of sin there are, let me define sin. First, sin is lawlessness, as we see in 1 John chapter 3, verse 4. 1 John chapter 3, verse 4. And it says, "Everyone who makes a practice of sinning also practices lawlessness. Sin is lawlessness." Second, sin is not doing what you know is right, as we can see in James chapter 4, verse 17. James chapter 4, verse 17. It says, "So, whoever knows the right thing to do and fails to do it, for him it is sin." Third of all, it is unrighteousness, as we see in 1 John chapter 5, verse 17. And it says, "All wrongdoing is sin, but there is sin that does not lead to death." Finally, sin is whatever is not from faith, as we see in Romans chapter 14, verse 23. And it says, "But whoever has doubts and is condemned, if he eats, because he is eating and is not from faith, for whatever he does proceeds from faith, that does not proceed from faith is sin." Now that we have defined sin, let me move on to tell you what types of sin there are. First of all, there are secret sins. These sins are the sins that we are not aware of committing. And we can see examples of this in Ephesians chapter 5, verse 12. Again, that is Ephesians chapter 5, verse 12. It says, "For it is shameful even to speak of the things that they do in secret." These sins are what are concealed from the eyes of others. But just because they are concealed from the eyes of others doesn't mean that they will always stay concealed. And you can see this in Numbers chapter 32, verse 23. Though the sins are unknown to man, they are known to God. God knows everything we do, both good and bad. And you can see these examples in Matthew chapter 6, verses 4, verses 6, and verses 18. All the secret sins that we commit, even though that people do not see them, God does. And they will be brought up to us, and we will be accountable for them on Judgment Day. Next sin that I want to talk about is the besetting sins. These are the sins that entangle and cling to us, as we can look in Hebrews chapter 12, verse 1. And it says, "Therefore, since we are surrounded by so great a cloud of witness, let also lay aside every weight and sin which clings so closely, and lets us run with endurance the race that is set before us." There are many Bible characters who also suffer from besetting sins, as you can see all throughout the Bible. Moses was beset with impatience. James and John, the sons of thunder, they were also beset with impatient severity. But let me ask you a question. What is your besetting sin? Is it the sin of habit, such as gambling, drinking, smoking, cursing, immorality? Is it the besetting sin of attitude, as judging, over-tolerance, covetousness, envy, jealousy? Or is it the besetting sin of tongue, such as gossip, fault-finding, destructive criticism, cursing, jesting, lying, filthy speech, and boasting? Is it misplaced affection, such as you place your affection in kinfolk, money, or worldly pleasures? Is it sin of the flesh, like gluttony, drunkenness, or also immorality? Or is it one of the other sins, such as procrastination, laziness, losing your temper, stealing, or even worrying? There are many different types of sin. There are sins of the Spirit, as you can see in Colossians 3:8. Sins of commission, as we see in 1 John chapter 3, verse 4. Sins of omission, as we see in 1 John chapter 5, verse 17. There are sins of doctrinal nature, sins of moral nature. There are sins that can be and can't be forgiven. There are sins of ignorance, sins of rebellion, sins of weakness. All these sins are sins that one of us have done in our past life or in our lives to come with. We will all deal with these.